It's 6 p.m. on a Friday here in Korea. Welcome to our newscast. I'm Daniel Che. Let us begin with the headlines. More than 80 people are killed as a truck mows people down in Nice in the south of France. The Korean government is trying to determine the whereabouts of 5 Korean citizens. Experts say that judging by the tactics and the weapons used, ISIS is likely to be behind the attack. As the first speaker at the Asia-Europe Meeting Summit in Mongolia, President Park Geun-hye offered her condolences to the victims and called for unified efforts on various goals, including fighting terrorism. South Korea's finance minister vows to speed up the process of drawing up an $8 billion budget supplement, which the government sees as crucial to cushioning the effects of its ongoing corporate restructuring efforts. At least 84 people have been killed and scores of others injured in Nice, where thousands gathered to celebrate Bastille Day. For details, we have our Hwang standing by. Ho-jun, I understand the French president himself was in Mongolia actually, but dropped everything to fly back home in the wake of the attack.
You're absolutely right, Daniel. President Francois Hollande was in Paris for an emergency meeting and gave a national television address. He said there's no denying the, quote, terrorist nature of the attack. He vowed that nothing will stop France's fight against terrorism and added that France will reinforce its actions in Syria and Iraq. He also extended by 3 months the state of emergency in France that has been in place since the Paris attack last year. The attack happened as thousands of people were gathered on the main promenade in Nice, enjoying the evening, until gunshots were heard and a white truck literally mowed people down while accelerating for a distance of about 2 kilometers.
A lorry arrived and smashed into everyone. It happened there on the promenade. Afterwards, there were shots and everything.
The truck finally stopped when police shot out the windscreen and killed the attacker. Local authorities found an arsenal of weapons inside the truck, including firearms, grenades, and explosives. Reports now say at least some or all of the weapons were fake.
Now, Ho-jun, what do we have so far on the attacker, and have there been any claims of responsibility for the attack by particular organizations?
Well, it's hard to say just yet. The driver has been identified as a 31-year-old French-Tunisian man from Nice based on ID documents found in the truck. However, authorities are still investigating, and reports are saying he was known by the police for petty crimes, but he hadn't been linked to extremism. No terrorist organization had claimed responsibility yet, but there are plenty of hints pointing to Islamic extremist groups such as ISIS. Apparently, ISIS has encouraged its followers to use such tactics before. Given the sheer scale of carnage and the discovery of sophisticated weaponry, experts are saying it's highly likely the attack was pre-planned and organized. Daniel?
Okay, thank you for those updates, Ho-jun. We'll turn to you for more from the latest developments there. Now, with the number of casualties on the rise and given the attack occurred in one of France's most popular tourist spots, the Korean government is on high alert, checking the safety of Korean nationals in that region. For more, we now connect to our Kwon So-hwa at Seoul's Foreign Ministry. So-hwa, what's the latest?
Hi, Daniel. No casualties of Korean nationals have been reported as of now, and South Korean officials are at the site of the incident and hospitals to check further. They were immediately dispatched to Nice from nearby Cannes and the embassy in Paris, according to an official here. Now, earlier today, the foreign ministry said 5 Koreans were out of contact and still are. But the official I spoke to said what we should take into consideration is that among them, some might have changed their USIM cards in their mobile devices. And there's also a person having his or her mobile phone repaired, so the search for them continues. Now, here at the ministry in Seoul, an emergency meeting of related offices was held this morning, and then another meeting with related ministries ended just a while ago. Now, officials decided to consider raising the travel alert for the region up another level from attention to refrain. Currently, a level 2 alert is in effect for Paris and areas nearby. Also, text messages for travelers will be sent on a more frequent basis, especially as it's the holiday season. Meanwhile, South Korea's foreign ministry strongly condemned the act, calling it a barbaric act of terrorism, and expressed its deep condolences to the victims. That's all I have for now. Back to you, Daniel.
Thank you for keeping us up to date on that matter. That was our foreign affairs correspondent, Kwon So-ah. Let's now turn our focus to Mongolia, where the 11th ASEM summit has kicked off. President Park Geun-hye gave the opening speech with remarks on the attack in Nice before elaborating on her vision for the summit's future. More from our Song Ji-sun in Ulaanbaatar.
President Park Geun-hye began her speech by expressing her deepest condolences to the victims and their families in Nice, stressing that terror attacks cannot be tolerated under any circumstances. As the first speaker of the session, President Park noted the challenges facing the world, like extreme violence and terrorism, North Korea's nuclear threats, and climate change. She said the Asia-Europe meeting group must take a leading role in global cooperation and underscored the need to improve the effectiveness of ASEM as a platform for economic cooperation. Against the rising trend of trade protectionism, President Park stressed that ASEM must lead open trade to both foster the growth of developing nations and narrow the economic gap between nations. President Park also suggested holding the ASEM Economic Ministers meeting in Korea next year for concrete discussions on how innovation and creativity can foster growth. The meeting was last held in 2003 and suspended after high-level talks in 2005 because ASEAN members were opposed to the Netherlands' refusal to issue a visa for Myanmar's representative over the country's human rights record. Park wrapped up her speech by calling for unified efforts and goals through ASEM's principal virtues of informality, flexibility, and networking. President Park also held bilateral talks with the leaders of Laos, Vietnam, and the European Union, seeking to strengthen those partnerships while asking for the country's support in reining in North Korea's nuclear ambitions. Song Ji-sun, Arirang News, Ulaanbaatar.
Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo's deputy foreign ministers wrapped up trilateral talks in Hawaii. The meeting comes as tensions are running high in the region over North Korea and territorial disputes in the South China Sea. U.S. Deputy Secretary of State Antony Blinken hosted South Korean First Vice Foreign Minister Im Sung-nam and Japanese Vice Foreign Minister Shinsuke Sugiyama. At the start of the meeting, U.S. Vice President Joe Biden delivered remarks underscoring the importance of security cooperation between the three nations. In recent days, North Korea has threatened physical retaliation in protest of U.S. sanctions on leader Kim Jong-un and the decision to deploy THAAD to South Korea. The talks also come after an international panel rejected China's territorial claims to most of South China Sea. To quell safety concerns regarding radar electromagnetic waves, South Korean Prime Minister Hwang visited the county selected to station the missile defense battery known as THAAD. Kim Hyun-bin has the latest in efforts to inform and assure the residents they are out of harm's way.
Prime Minister Hwang Kyo-ahn apologized for not notifying the residents of Seongju County of the government's decision to deploy the U.S. missile defense system THAAD to the area.
I would like to apologize first for not notifying the residents beforehand. I assure you that the government will thoroughly inspect THAAD to guarantee its safety.
He made a trip to try and reassure area residents that the electromagnetic waves emitted from THAAD's radar system would not impact their health, and that the government was extremely cautious in making the decision. Upon his arrival to the area, Hwang was met by a group of demonstrators protesting the deployment. Meanwhile, a Gallup Korea poll on the issue released Friday shows that 50% of those surveyed were in favor of the deployment, while 32% were against. More than half of those surveyed said they thought THAAD is needed for the safety and security of the Korean Peninsula. The poll was conducted from Tuesday through Thursday of this week, with just over 1,000 people nationwide. Seoul and Washington announced last week that THAAD will be deployed to South Korea to better counter North Korea's growing nuclear and ballistic missile threats. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
And over at the National Assembly, the deployment of that U.S. missile defense system topped the agenda this Friday. The three main parties have conflicting positions, but have agreed to take steps toward a resolution. Ji Myung-gil updates us on the developments there.
The ruling Saenuri Party said Friday that it will hold a Q&A next week on the government's decision to deploy THAAD to South Korea. It explained it was complying with a request from the opposition because it values cooperation.
The ruling party has agreed to the opposition's demand to hold a Q&A on the THAAD deployment on July 19th and 20th. We're fully cooperating.
But the party also reiterated its position that the THAAD deployment plan does not need parliamentary approval, rejecting a call from the minor opposition People's Party. The Saenuri Party also sided with the government in its assessment that the THAAD radar will not have an adverse impact on people's health, in response to public concern about electromagnetic radiation exposure. Meanwhile, the main opposition Minju Party of Korea held its first THAAD committee meeting with 8 of its lawmakers.
Our THAAD committee will discuss the problems with the decision-making process related to the THAAD deployment and set of countermeasures.
Woo, the committee chair, said the panel will continue to discuss the effectiveness of the system, including the diplomatic and economic impact. The Minju Party currently remains neutral about the plan, although some of its lawmakers have voiced their discontent. The minor opposition People's Party continued to push the government to reverse its decision.
The THAAD deployment plan should be scrapped. It should also be subject to parliamentary approval.
The party whip also urged the Minju Party to come out against the plan, adding that its stance will damage its identity as an opposition party. Kim Young-git, Arirang News.
Korea's finance minister said the government will try to get its budget supplement submitted to the parliament by the end of this month. Shin Se-min outlines how the multi-billion-dollar injection will be very much needed alongside reform efforts.
Korea's finance minister says timing will be key for the government's proposed budget supplement. During a meeting with the government and the ruling party Friday morning, Finance Minister Yoo Il-ho said he will speed up the process of drawing up the plan for the proposed budget supplement of over 10 trillion won, or $8.8 billion, so it can be submitted to the parliament by the end of the month. He added that much of the extra budget will go towards securing jobs for those affected by the government's ongoing corporate restructuring drive, in addition to propping up growth in the affected regions, especially due to the large number of layoffs expected in the shipbuilding sector. He said a further loss of jobs must be stopped, as jobs are directly linked to people's livelihoods. The minister also stressed a need for Parliament to pass the supplementary budget bill quickly. The ruling Saenuri Party backed Yoo, saying the government should put about $88 million towards support for the suffering shipbuilding sector. The party also said the money shouldn't be spent on social projects or free education programs, as the opposition parties have called for, as the country's job market is in dire straits. Korea's youth unemployment rate was 10.3% last month, up from 9.7% in May. Finance Minister Yoo had previously told the parliament during a meeting of the Special Committee on Budget Accounts that the extra budget plan would be submitted by no later than 25th of this month. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Trade barriers between Korea and Colombia have been significantly scaled back, paving the way for Korean exporters to get a stronger foothold in Latin America's third largest market. Our Kim Min-ji explains how the latest accord should provide the boost Korea's slowing exports need.
Korea has become the first Asian country to ink a free trade pact with Colombia. Expectations are high that the deal could provide a much-needed shot in the arm for Korea's exports, which have slowed every month since January last year. Colombia is considered one of the most promising markets in Latin America, with the third largest population in the region and fourth largest GDP, not to mention its abundance of natural resources. Korea is Colombia's ninth biggest trading partner, and bilateral trade stood at over $2.1 billion in 2014. While growing, bilateral trade accounts for less than 1% of Korea's total trade, but that could soon be a different story. Under the free trade agreement, tariffs on roughly 4,400 Korean export products to Colombia will be eliminated immediately, while tax will be lowered for almost 2,800 goods. Over the next 10 years, duties will be scrapped on 96.1% of products from Colombia and 96.7% of products from Korea. Korea's key export products like cars, which are currently hit with a heavy tax rate of 35%, will be phased out gradually, while duties on promising products like cosmetics will be gone in 7 to 10 years. Korea was able to safeguard vulnerable sectors like beef and rice. Korea mainly exports industrial products to Colombia, while it imports primary products, so the two countries have a complementary relationship. And in that sense, the FTA is expected to give the trade volume a lift. The FTA will give Korea price competitiveness over its competitors like Japan and China, which have yet to ink deals. On top of that, experts say its products subject to immediate tax exemption are much wider in scope in comparison to that of deals Korea has with other countries. Positive effects will show up sooner than expected. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
South Korea's very popular messaging app Line has made its successful debut in both New York and Tokyo, raising over $9 billion in the U.S. alone. Kim Jong-soo looks into what this could signal for the future of Korean tech giant Naver.
Shares of Korean tech giant Naver's Japan-based messaging company Line have jumped nearly 50% after its IPO debut in Tokyo, following a successful launch in New York on Thursday. The total value of the startup stands at $9.3 billion in the biggest tech IPO this year. On the Tokyo Stock Exchange, the shares first traded at 4,900 yen, or 48.5% above their IPO price of 3,300 yen. This is after it climbed as much as 36% in its New York debut on Thursday, with shares initially priced at roughly $33, closing up 27%. Line is the 7th most used messaging app in the world. As of March, it had 218 million monthly active users, mainly in Japan and Southeast Asia. Facebook-owned WhatsApp leads the online messaging market with 1 billion monthly users. It is followed by Facebook Messenger with 900 million users and China's WeChat with 700 million. Industry experts say Line must capitalize on the positive debut and look for ways to increase its market share. An initial strategy involves using the revenue generated from the IPO to enhance its presence in Japan, Taiwan, and Thailand. It can also look into expanding its presence in North America, strengthening its brand name through effective merger and acquisitions. Kim Jong-soo, Arirang News.
Before we wrap up our newscast, this just coming in from South Korea's foreign ministry. 4 out of 5 Korean nationals that were out of contact in Nice have been confirmed that they are safe. We'll have more updates coming up at 10 p.m. Korea time with Moon Gun-young's News Center, so do join us then. For now, thank you for watching.